function at the club at about 1990, I'm not sure, around that era. It was a fantastic era for squash, and a period where we were incredibly enthusiastic. They were just wonderful times, and it's no surprise that the bulk of people who have come along tonight come from that era, and so pleasing to see that there's been so little change in so many of you.
Do you need glasses, too?
He's a lawyer.
I left the glasses at the office. Format for tonight, we're going to have a welcome shortly from Tony Johnston, and then we've asked three past presidents of the club, sort of the old, the middle and the new, to give an overview of their time in charge, and then we will have dinner, and then ask Dame Susan to address us. So could I introduce please Tony Johnston. Tony's the current president of the Otago Club. Tony came to Dunedin from Timaru back in '89 and was part of the move of Logan Park to Otago several years ago. He was New Zealand chair, in fact, between 2013 and 2014. It's gone from that back down to grassroots level and is president of the Otago Club. Tony Johnston.
Right, hi everyone. Dave McCartney says it's got to be short. Yeah, just to reiterate a very big welcome to all of you. On behalf of the organising committee, we just really appreciate the efforts you've made to come from, some of you from long distances. And I just think when you analyse it, a club is only a very small part of the building, and John Harrison might disagree, and it's, I don't know where he is. There's John. But it's about the people that use the club, and when you look around here tonight, while we're a slightly older bunch than we used to be, we've done pretty well in the people department as a club. So, tonight we're privileged to have Dame Susan here, and it's quite a big trip for her, a couple of flights, and we really appreciate you coming down, and look forward to hearing from you later. So, thank you, Susan. We also have some of our life members here. In chronological order, they are Mike McCarthy, who was a president. He was a New Zealand president, and in the days when they had presidents and not chairs, I think. And he was also with my friend Arthur Gray, part of the inaugural committee in 1968 or 69. Go Arthur! Other life members we have here is Noel Carroll here? No, didn't make it. So, but we have got Lindsay McLennan, Greg Sligo, Mark Ribbon, Chris Bosworth, and Gerard De Courcy. Gerard had 6 years on the board of Squash New Zealand as well, but he also went on and became a vice president for the World Squash Federation. We've had a tradition of New Zealand squash, and with Gerard even more. So, we also have Val Dempster here, who unfortunately Val's husband Lindsay passed away a few years ago, but it's nice to have Val here. And finally, we do have John Harrison here, the man who designed the building in 1968. So, well done, and I imagine you worked on a limited budget, and that's why there was no insulation. But But no, it's still standing, and it's yeah, credit to you. So I think it's worth me proposing a toast to those distinguished members that are here tonight. So we could all be upstanding. So to our club's distinguished guests.
Distinguished guest. Oh, is that
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Right, so just a couple of other things. I just want to thank the organising committee. It was led by Greg Sligo and Ainsley. A lot of work from Rangi, and we also had Mark Ribbon, Rick Fife and Don Dennison, and without these people doing all that work. So the first two did a lot of work. And just one final comment. I know, as you guys know, that clubs are the heart and soul of our game in New Zealand. And I think all of you will have been on a committee or helped run the club. And for our club, it's a credit to the work that you guys have done throughout the years that we are where we are today. So thank you. And otherwise, this weekend is all about you guys. And I hope you have enjoyed it so far and you continue to enjoy it. Thank you.
And we're celebrating, of course, 50 years since the opening of our courts at Mella Park in 1968. But if you have a look at the honours board, you will see that the first line of entries is 1963, because the club in fact started at the Logan Park courts and left there amid some controversy. The two courts at Logan Park were in fact built by the Lawn Tennis Association as a commercial venture for them, and it was a way to raise funds. So they built the two squash courts, and squash just took off. They had to close the membership, they had a waiting list, and squash approached tennis about building two more courts at Logan Park alongside where the current courts are based. Tennis wasn't interested in this because they had plans themselves. They didn't want to spend more money on squash. The income was quite good. They were going to have a stand out there to watch tennis. And what ensued was a significant sort of local argument, to the extent that the squash and tennis communities were called in front of the mayor and the city council, and who tried to mediate it. And one of the pieces of memorabilia back at the squash club is this fantastic minute book written, I suspect by Leslie Cranfield, who I never met, but I'm not actually sure. And this is wonderful longhand minutes, but in there are newspaper clippings from that era with headlines like "Sports Codes Told to Stop Squabbling." And a story which goes on that the then mayor, Mr. Calvert, was sat down to try and mediate the dispute between the squash and the tennis communities, and was said to have thrown his papers down on the table and said, "This is absolutely disgusting, I can't do anything with this, please stop squabbling in the way that you are." And that ultimately resolved itself with the city council offering the squash community council land if they would relocate and build. And option number one, I understand, was down on City Road, sort of above from Robin Hood, where I think there's some playground equipment now, but there was some issue with building there. And Mella Park was council reserve land, and that was option number two, and the land that was ultimately chosen. I think that came from the Ellis family, right, of Arthur Ellis fame, And they had a very strong tie with the artillery, so they built sleeping bags for mountaineering and heading to the South Pole and so on, and they're a wonderful local family. So that led to the squash club packing their bags and heading away from Logan Park. You'll see in 1963 the club champion and president was one D.G. Green, went on to be a national champion, and then in 1967 there was no competition. I'm not sure whether that was a product of soured relationships or simply we were building and the courts weren't ready. But in 1968 we had our inaugural club championships, an open event at Mallet Park where we now reside successfully. And on that inaugural committee was one Michael McCarthy. Michael was club president in 1975, 1976, New Zealand president in 1979-80, and packed his bags in 1982 to head to Auckland. But it's always maintained a very strong tie to Dunedin and the Otago club, and it's lovely to see Michael and Josie back for this event. Could I ask Michael to perhaps come and tell us a little bit more about the early days?
Thank you, Gerard. We unpacked in Auckland, but we've packed back a couple of times to come back and join the Squash Club at the time of its 25th anniversary. We just dropped in very briefly, but got a free entry and did okay with that. But look, Greg got hold of me a little while ago and said, would you care to come, please, and say something short and to the point? And I thought, oh, yeah, that's pretty easy. And then I thought, hell's teeth. What can I say that's short, to the point, and that I can remember succinctly? So, it's your pleasure, I hope, and my privilege just to say a few words about the very beginning, early days of the club at Mallet Park. And let's bring it back into perspective again. Version 1 of the Otago Squash Club existed in the Sharman's building before the Second World War. They ran out of rubber, I presume, to make squash balls, and they ran out of men and women to play it, so that facility just went into abyss. Version 2, as Gerard's referred to, was the venue and the time at Logan Park. So I'm now talking about version 3. And when you start to read books, text and things like that, you know, version 1 is always supplanted by version 2, which is supplanted by version 3, and if there's anything else new come up, for God's sake, it's not going to be in regards to a squash club here, because it's here to stay. Mention's made of John Harrison, who within 6 months of having been approached initially by the club to set something up, the building was planned, approved, built and opened. Now you try and do that today. I asked John how long it would take, and he thought it would probably take a year to actually just get approval, let alone So we got inveigled. Arthur had been down at Logan Park with the committee. I was new to the scene because Basil grabbed hold of me. But the first 3 or 4 meetings, which were about a weekly occasion from the day we started, there was a stack of new applications, complete with cash attached, wanting to rejoin the new Otago Squash Club. So we realised very quickly, within about 6 weeks of opening, that we had potentially 400 members. And this wasn't going to be enough to run any significant squash events. So without ado, John was approached again, I think, to draw some more plans for Court 4. And by the end of that year, by November, remember opening in May, by November we had the 4th court running down the bottom end of the thing, funded by a little bit of debentures, a little bit of loan money, etc. But away we went. And so the club got into it. It was enthusiasm and hard work that got it from an opening in May to 4 courts in November. Tony made mention of people. And what I'd like to spend the next couple of minutes of my time is talking about the essential ingredient for the future and the foster of this game. It is people. And while we look backwards, and the Maori have a saying about you go forward, but you look back at what's happened, you look back at the dead to make sure that you do not make the same mistake again. So I'm suggesting that we do have to look back a little bit. So I think everybody knows, or most people should know, read the history. Don Green was a legend both at local, national and international level. And he did a lot for squash for many years. But the quiet man behind these courts and this sport was one Basil de Lambert. And I'd like to just sort of introduce you to him. He was a tall, if you look at some of the photos where you may see him, he was a tall and I would say slim man, very strong, and had a very good idea of what constitutes the necessary things for a successful club. And he and I did have a few discussions. I mean, he was telling me what he wanted done, and would you go ahead and get this done, please, youngster, because you're one of the junior members of the committee. But we needed competition, we needed social interplay, and we needed local things to happen to make people want to come. Before the fourth court was even started, Basil had brewed up an inter-club competition. He knew all the players at the medical school, he knew all the guys at the dental school, he knew guys all around Dunedin, well, Fernhill, obviously, and ourselves as an incipient club. And suddenly up goes a list of teams, A, B, C, D, E and F, I think. Does that make 8? Or G? Doesn't matter. But they were just named players that he plucked from all over the place. And could we do it? Could I do a draw for 8 teams to play 7 round robins, and we're underway next week? That was Basil, just for competition alone. Socially, just as I looked up here, as I was starting, there was a picture in there of Court 2, about 6 weeks after we opened, in which he conned his daughters into cutting out a profile of the New York skyline, sticking it around 2 sides in the front wall of Court 2, which was closed off for play from 6 p.m. that night, and everybody was invited to the New York night. The place was packed, jammed. There was dancing on Court 2 to music that the girls had put on the tape from the 1960s. There were no lets asked, there were no lets given, because there wasn't any room to even think about it when you were throwing a court. Sorry, I've just run out of a sequence of things I was thinking about. Basil also he did a lot of work around the courts, which I don't think too many people saw. If you went down here before it opened, he often had his wife's floor polisher and a whole lot of floor wax. And he was going around the entranceway with the floor polisher, he was going around the stairs, going up, going along the gallery, going along the changing rooms, putting more coats of wax with his wife's floor polisher, 10 or 11 o'clock at night, having run a fairly full day in his radiology practice. But that was Basil. He wouldn't ask anybody else to do it. He could do it. But when it came to cleaning the walls, there was a tendency for squash balls in those days to leave black marks. So if you were some of his chosen few, you got rung up and asked, we're going to clean the courts this boom. Would you come please, bring some old towels, bring some old gear, and I'll bring the solvent. Basil was a master on solvents because he was taller than anybody else. He could get on with this stuff which was going to lift the rubber off, providing those following were fast enough with the water to get it before it set and not damage his sacred floors. But he did that for 2 or 3 occasions at least that I can remember, and if you tried that with Osh nowadays, you wouldn't even exist. It was pretty toxic. From just people came some rivalries, and I just sort of mention a couple, if I may. These 2 contestants died a number of years ago. Bert Wilson, who was on the initial committee, and George Barton. Bert was about this big, I suppose, generously. Loved cigarettes, loved beer, and if he ever thought squash was not made for somebody, Bert was the perfect example. If he even changed in the changing room, he was coughing and puffing before he got on the court. George had a butchery shop down the exchange area, and I can still remember that there were pigs went round on the neon lights, right? Those pigs went round faster than those two guys that got on the squash court. If you heard them playing, you knew who was on the court, didn't you? You would hear Bert go, and that was after the first set, or the first rally, let alone anything else. Another one that I just passed some comment about, which went for a number of years, was Julian Smith playing Trevor Scott. And this was very much a quiet little sort of thing that happened sometimes in off hours, but they played to the death. They played series of 3 matches. The first one to win 3 in a row got shouted dinner by the other one. I never knew who paid for more dinners than not, but it always seemed to me that it seemed to be fairly even towards the end of the time. And lastly, one of the highlights of playing squash in Dunedin in the early days was to go and play Fernhill at Fernhill in the middle of June, early July, on a court that is near to Antarctica and the direct winds that could be. Invercargill squash court at least was hidden behind a hedge. And their wind went over the top and hit straight into Fernhill. To make sure that nobody had a problem at Fernhill, they did have a tray just by the doors you could go onto the court. And in that there were numerous nips of brandy. Supplied, I think, either to start, to have in the middle, or to have at the finish. And I certainly know a few who had them at the finish. You could play squash at Fernhill different times now. You could have a 7 o'clock game, and Greg Sligo assured me that he got home by about 1 o'clock quite often. Because if you were...
I can tell you that from today. He harassed me to get me down here, actually.
Enough of the frivolities, please. Madam Speaker. The last thing I'd like to, well, one of the major things I'd like to finish was 1972. 1971, Don was the president of the New Zealand Association, and I think as a reward, the Otago Squash Club, the new facility, was given the New Zealand Championships to run. There had been in 71 a very successful competition in Hamilton where there were international teams over and there were international players. And there had been some whisperings at the back of North Island squash courts who would go to Dunedin in the winter to play for a tin cup. However, the committee thought about this. I'm sorry, that tin was gold, by the way, if you read the history. But the committee, in the New Zealand committee at that stage, decided, let's make this something of an event. Let's run it over a week. Let's have some teams. So each of the 8 districts had to front up with 4 men and 4 women, separate competitions, men's and women's, to play round robins and then semi-finals and finals to culminate on the Wednesday with the final of the teams events, and then move forward on the Thursday, Friday, Saturday to the individual. There was some thought that, oh well, yeah, okay. The districts were forced to do it because they were equalised. All the costs were put into the pool and divided by 8 and everybody paid their share. Otago, or the southern districts, who didn't have too many people to travel anywhere, paid a lot of money to get some of the North Islanders down, but it worked and it got people here to play. There was a thought that maybe once some of the better players were eliminated from an event from the main draw, they'd go home because they weren't interested in anything else. Don did have a big meeting with the team managers and assured them he held the return tickets. So they had to come and grovel to him if anybody wanted to go home before they had finished all the things that they had to play in. So consequently, when it came to Saturday, the finals day, virtually everybody who played in that championship was here. And it was a marvellous triumph, the start of a festival of squash for a week. And it's lasted that way through today. Teams were motelled for the first 3 days, or for the team's event, and then they were billeted if they required. And many people, many districts put their hands up, and many of you good people, or maybe your parents, or maybe your grandparents, God only knows, said, yes, we'll take some. And they did. The only person who was very reluctant to move was Niven Barber. Because Niven had had a very successful teams event. And he was in a motel down the Kaikoura Valley Road, and he was the unfortunate one who got the cot. But he thought maybe this was his lucky break, and he could break through and win his first New Zealand championship if he stayed where he was. So Nifty stayed there and still didn't win. What did we do to make people happy? In the old lounge, which was about the size of 2 of these tables together, we had oysters on the Sunday night for everybody who was there. It was chocker, I tell you now. Tuesday evening, home hospitality. A number of families put their houses up. They were provided with some food from a fund, and players from teams were selected to go to specific houses with some of the officials. So there was a tremendous mixing around of people. On the last night after the finals, it was all on, we thought. There was a mystery night. Nobody knew where it was going to go, except for a blessed few, but no, many of the players. So at 7 o'clock, I presume, they were loaded into buses. I think about 8 buses went out with people who walked into the big lounge at Glenfellick as you went up the drive, and as they arrived, the black velvets were just being topped up. And that champagne and stout in decent-sized glasses. There was nothing meagre about these. So the evening went with quite a bang, right from the first moment when they went through the door. To return home, the buses did the reverse trip. I don't know quite what time they left, might have been 11, 11:30 to get everybody back at a reasonable time. One bus went missing. We didn't find out until a little later that this was a bus that was commandeered by the players and 1 or 2 or 3 of our members who were on that bus who suggested, well, why not come up to my place? And the bus driver said, oh, okay, where is it? Oh, well, it's up the back of Kew, isn't it? Now, Kew's up the far side of the hill. And the bus driver said, well, what street? And they told him. He said, oh, okay. So he negotiated the last 2 blocks of that voyage backwards with the bus, because that was the only way he could get back out again. And evidently a good night was had by all, was it, Mr. Quirk? We don't know how they got home or when they got home, but that was his business, nobody else's. I can't pass this through without making reference to Harry Hicks, Varco, John Paul Studios, whatever's name he went under at that stage. Harry manned a caravan, which was the bar, attached to the back of Court 4, just to jump over the thing and you were in the caravan. And he worked that solidly from day to night, right through the tournament. We went through several pallets of spikes.
In France in 1986, I think. We had Ross Norman at world number 2, Stu Davenport world number 3, and in the women's game, Dame Susan was conquering the world champion, world number 1, and the sport took off. And we all fondly remember those days. They were perhaps the best days, squash, and having the high profile that was gifted to us by our leading athletes assisted no end in that. And in 1991, during that period, really, President was Mark Stephenson. Mark, come up and tell us about that period.
I know you, I'm with you today. You need to get back playing. Stop being such a wimp.
And she's right, you know, I picked up a racket this afternoon for the first time in 5 years.
You're on my team.
And hit a ball. I actually hit a ball up down the court 3 times before I thought, I'm out of here. But the fire is still there. And this is the part that really grates me. I'm kind of knowledgeable and old enough to know it would be crazy stupidity. Because the bit between the left ear and the right ear would want to do this, and the other 100 kilos would say, oh. So I don't know, Susan, I don't know, but don't be surprised. I doubt you'll read about it.
I see you at 9 in the morning.
Oh, I've got some stuff you can do at home.
You're on my team, Mark. You'll be fine.
Thanks, Don, mate. Actually, between us, we look pretty bloody slim.
Yeah, which glass are you looking through?
Yes, I looked through rose-tinted glasses all my life. When Greg phoned me and said we could come and talk to this crowd of broken down squash players, I thought, what the hell am I going to say to these people that they haven't heard 100 times before? And so it rested that, I guess. To paraphrase old Crocodile Dundee at Paul Hogan at an Academy Awards dinner one time, he spoke and said, remember the 3 G's when you're up on stage. Be gracious, be grateful, and get off. And so my 2.5 minutes is almost up. I was very fortunate to have hung around, as GD alluded to, the Ellis family, or my best mate at school was David Ellis, the son of Murray Ellis. And I got to hit squash balls when my 2 brothers joined the club at the founding, at the opening of the club. So I had my 2 older brothers as mentors, and I just picked up a racket. I took it up seriously in 1971, 5th form of high school, playing in the bottom rugby team, training down at Logan Park in the pissing rain on a Thursday. That wasn't going to happen. So they started a squash club, so there you go. There's a roof over this one. So that's where I started playing squash. And I really went through the juniors. What's his name? Ray Williams and Annie coaching juniors, and his little boys were about this high, and then the phase of motorcycles, and Chris Bozzy and I would be down there, my brother Kim, and it was half motorcycle, half squash, and they were fun days. But I really only got seriously into it when I came back from overseas in about 1980, and about 81, Alan Goodman and I started playing regular squash. Every Saturday, 4:30, regular as clockwork. We always followed 2 old farts on court. Dave Quirk and Sid Dobbs. They were as anal as we were about our squash. And so we had that competition, it wasn't very serious. Only life and death. And we ended up having this series called the No Bullshit series. And the No Bullshit meant you weren't allowed to lie about nicks. You weren't allowed to lie about leads. You had to be fair. There was no lying about that ball's out. You're blind. And the loser had to buy the winner a meal at a restaurant and his wife at the end of the year's series. We weren't quite so draconian as to be every 3 weeks or whatever it was.
Yes, sorry.
Good, he's never bought me a bloody meal yet. No, cheat. But I was on committee. I ended up on committee, as you do, and I ended up being. I think Wayne Smith drove this idea, this concept of shifting everything upstairs. And got it right now. Doesn't matter. And I followed along as president and was, between myself and Steve Flanders, changed the club completely, and there were big plans. There were going to be an extension across the other 1 and 2 court, and a weight room and training, and this was, gyms were just starting to become the fad. But as usual for all club facilities, man, where's the cash? We have been very fortunate at Otago throughout the entire life of it, really from Bernie O'Donnell, Sid, a couple of other people that drove the purchase of the downtown complex. And that was the underpinned. What was unfortunate that Monticello, the Zebra Club, had a fire, and they were 50% shareholders in the downtown facility, and they were asking for their money back, which meant we had to sell. And Les Mills had moved into the building, so Leslie Clenner and I were the negotiating party charged with selling the facility to Les Mills, which we did. But it took a long time. In the process, they found that a corner of the downtown of the Les Mills facility, the building, actually wasn't built on title. And so then, have you ever seen the City Council try and shift something that's not on a bit of paper? It took years to get the funds through. But finally they came through, and so that gave us, that underpinned the confidence to go ahead and spend the money on the development upstairs. And so my biggest thrill of being president in that era was signing a cheque to pay for this major change in the club. And so it has gone on from there. And I think, I look at the club rooms now, man, they look fantastic. I think a compliment has to go to the current. Never look so sharp as when they were brand new. So I would say a very big thank you to the current committee, and thank you for asking me to come up and waffle on.
And with all respect to Mark, we move very much to the next generation. The 2000s threw up different issues for squash clubs. In 2001-2003, our president was Caroline Hyam. She did a PhD in natural hazards and now works at the Centre for Sustainability, and all that seems highly relevant to squash in some way, and I can't quite put my finger on. Caroline, come and tell us a bit about the 2000 period, please.
Last a woman.
I was actually going to ask for a raise of hands because I'm obviously part of a very nice club of past presidents, but can we have a raise of hands of who's been a president of Otago Squash Club? Two.
Only half a year.
Kim. It's Kim. I was going to say Kim. Kim was my mentor. You were right before me, right? Yeah. And Rami came later, but yeah. So there are female presidents, and thanks, Gerard, for inviting one along. And it's really lovely to be here. I'm so grateful to the committee who has brought all this together. I mean, just arriving in the door, and within 10 minutes I was laughing to the point of crying with Yvonne, and just back in the groove of old squash friends. So it's really beautiful to be here. I guess going back a few years to when I started playing squash, 1993. I was 18, so I'll help you there. You don't need to do the maths on your own. So my dad kicked off my squash career, and my two older brothers, one of whom's here, James Hyam. He was the past president of University Squash Club. And my sister, the four of us all played. So what we sort of lacked in ability, we made up for in competitiveness. And my dad was probably the worst of the lot of us. He just hated losing. And I remember he insisted on playing at varsity because it was the coldest, most miserable club in Dunedin. He loved a cold ball, my dad. And his best thing was, serving, of course. The serve, the family joke is the serve always had snow on it. Like, it would just go up and kind of stand at the back of the court and wait for it to come back down, and it would just glance off the side wall and die in the back wall, inevitably. So it would be back and forth, often Nine Love. He hated rallying. And then of course there was the drop, which was always tight and low and horrible to try and return. So it's fair to say my squash career almost ended before it had really begun, thanks to Dad. But fortunately I got out and started playing some other people, including Pat. Pat's here tonight. There are others here that really helped me along to start enjoying squash, basically. And so yeah, I ticked along for a couple of years. I joined Otago in 2000, and you know, I was there or thereabouts with the talent really, but at the time, I think, well, the female players around the scene at the time were the likes of Jackie Hawkes, her sister Rebecca. Jackie went on to play for New Zealand. The so-called unbeatables, Tracy Storer and Liz Young, just fierce, amazing women squash players. The Sincock sisters, Alana and Carla, both brilliant players, and still hear from them both today. And then of course Jackie Kingy and Chrissy Ferguson, who were both wonderful to watch, just such amazing natural talents. So I used to dream of beating them, and I used to play them with all my heart, and of course never won. But you know, so that was great to have a go with players of such amazing talent. So I guess it was around that time that I decided it was probably better for me to just try and give back to the game in other ways. And I rocked up to my first committee meeting in 2001, and by the end of that meeting I'd been elected president. They saw me a mile off.
How does that work?
Young, fresh-faced, young person, and I was in with a grin, and I thought, what the heck have I taken on? But very fortunately for me, there was an amazing talent on the committee at that stage. Stuart and Yvonne King, who else was there? We had Chris Bosworth, of course, the awesome Chris Bosworth, Chris Amers, Chris Kennedy, Chris Gable.
Chris De Courcy?
Basically just asked Chris to do something and it would inevitably get done. There was Brett Meffin, who was the treasurer at the time, and Paul Cook and others I'm sure I've forgotten, but it was a great team and we had a lot of fun. And I was just rereading some of my old AGN books, the president has to write it in the front. And I'd always say, if you're thinking of volunteering, it's not all hard work. We actually do have a lot of fun, and we did. We had a real laugh. It was awesome fun. So, what else? I guess in terms of my presidency, being quite young, I guess I was more of a caretaker president. I didn't take on any major projects. We did have a leak in the roof, and I was quite proud that we got that fixed. I was actually just trying to jog my memory this afternoon, going through a few emails, and I saw some going back and forth between Gerard and me. I was looking for some wise ears, because we had this amazing brand new whiz-bang electronic door system. Remember that? It's really cool, and it's going to be awesome, and the lights would come on automatically, and it was great. But it didn't work. It was just useless. And I used to get called up all the time to go down and turn the lights on, and I'm like, oh God. Luckily I didn't have kids or an actual life at the time. I was called to go to Scotland. So I was frantically emailing Gerard and others saying, what are we going to do about this bloody system? They decided they were going to charge us $2,500 to maintain the system, which wasn't working.
What did Gerard say?
Gerard was on the New Zealand board at the time, and he put the feelers out across other clubs, and there were about 10 others that were having the same problem. So we ended up, I think we sorted it.
So was that helpful, do you think?
He's quite good at solution to that problem. But, there are so many highlights, and I won't bore you with them, but I think my favourite things were running tournaments. It was always a real laugh, and lots of fun. We had great people always willing to put their hands up to be controllers and things like that. And there was one particular prize giving that was a bit of a laugh, because we were getting through the list of prizes and stuff, and we were down to the women's draw, and I called out the winner of the plate, and she was sitting literally right at the back of the room, and she kind of came through. The clapping had stopped, but she was still kind of walking through at that awkward moment, when people weren't quite there yet. And she took her prize, and then she started walking away, and then I looked down on the ground, and a G-string had dropped out of the bottom of her pants. Oh, you dropped something!
White plate winner.
And then earlier in my career, I remember playing down at varsity one day, and we were in the middle of our game, and two streakers came on and did a couple of laps. Anyway, a couple of other highlights. Hosting Dame Susan back in 2003 at Otago Squash Club when she played her incredible match against Scott Mason in a charity match. Where's Scott? Is he here? Yeah. She did break a sweat, I remember that.
There's a photo.
And we also had Richard Hadley along. I can't remember exactly the circumstances of him being there, but he was really interesting. He told some amazing stories. He had his old cricket bag there, and he told us a little mantra that he used to say to himself, which I can't remember, sorry. What else? I think that's about the end of my little witty stories, really. But and also we were only given 5 minutes, so I'm going to try and stick to time, Gerard. Okay. But I think really, like, I've just got so many fond memories of being part of the club, and it's delightful to be here tonight to see lots of familiar faces. So I'm looking forward to chatting to lots more people, and enjoy yourselves. It's been great to be here. Thank you.
That's a quick surf through 50 years. Well done to all of you. That was fantastic. We're now having a buffet meal, and you'll be brought up a table at a time. But I think as much as we enjoy each other's company tonight, there are people who are not with us. There is a long list, and Mike's talked about Basil de Lambert and his influence. I particularly think of my time of Bill Douglas wandering along the upstairs gallery, donging that thing to start. And Lindsay Dempster, those pairs of hands who just... Mel Dempster's with us tonight, and welcome. And Betty Douglas has moved up to Blenheim, where she lives with one of her daughters, and going well. So, if you toast, please, for absent friends. Absent friends, thank you. Thanks, Tom. My very real pleasure and honour to welcome Dame Susan Devoy here tonight. Undoubtedly, the high point of her playing career was her selection for the Otago National League team. I think the 90s or somewhere, you'll remember this, the team uniform. Amazing what you find at the bottom of your drawer. We had a great time. That was a fantastic event that only ran for a couple of years. But each team had 2 guys and 1 woman. And as you may have noticed, our woman was quite strong. And that put a bit of pressure on the boys to front up. And the boys were Mark Ribbon and Scott Gardner and I. And I think we managed to get our way through to the finals, but the final series, but finally fell over. Look, we sort of started each evening 1-0. But I have to say it was fantastic to be able to play in the same team. It's probably the only claim to fame I have in my squash career. But it probably highlighted to me the way, even with a National League team like that you were a team player and a great supporter, and it was fantastic to have you in our camp for that event, and it was a fantastic year. In addition to that highlight, I think there were 4 world titles and British Open titles, and the list goes on. My first memories are, I think, 1982 New Zealand Juniors at Otago, where I think you probably gave me my first beating. And you were clearly heading for a stellar career, and ultimately certainly delivered on that. And I don't think I could describe the debt that squash in this country owes to you. Yeah. In your non-squash professional career, most recently, of course, you were appointed 2013 as Race Relations Commissioner, a very senior appointment that was very well supported. And that's no doubt been an interesting and fascinating role, and an incredibly important role for this country.
Sound like a lawyer.
eventually. I know Susan,
Soon you'll start sounding like a public servant.
or possibly your husband. Susan came down to Dunedin, also in Otago, on a number of occasions through her career and enjoyed considerable support. And was just one of the players in the tournament, and we always thoroughly enjoyed having her down here and visiting us. We're fortunate to have you. Susan has 4 sons. There are 3 sons currently this weekend playing in Cousin Shield, so I know your attention is demanded elsewhere. So the fact that you took out the time to come down here is fantastic, and we're very grateful for that. Your other son, Julian, is a fantastic middle distance runner on the collegiate scene in the United States. Been running out of Providence College in Rhode Island, running sub 4-minute miles. So you've had a fantastically interesting and busy time since the National League highlight.
Still waiting for the ultimate goal.
Can I say welcome back? Thanks, Susan Devoy.
I was going to say cura, because that's what I always have to say in my job. I usually say ngā mihi nui, ngā mihi nāna, kia koutou katoa, and I can actually say hello in 160 different languages, if you'd like me to. It doesn't look like any of you would understand, so I won't do that. But I'd just like to say, Gerard, thank you for that very kind and true introduction. You're right, my life has never had a highlight as playing for the National League here in Otago. It's great to be here. I didn't really have much choice. I got an email from Gerard first. I didn't respond to that because I'm quite busy. I've got quite a full-on job. Then I got a text from Jenny and Ron. I didn't reply to that because they're good sorts, you know. I'll get back to you. And then I got harassed by Greg Sligo. If I worked for the New Zealand Human Rights Commission, I'd make a complaint. And bullying him, I thought, oh my God. Okay, I'll do that. So I've got nothing else better to do for Queen's Birthday weekend. It only took me 5 hours to get here. But that's okay, it's going to take me 7 to get home tomorrow, so that's okay, and it'll be all good. So I just want to say it's great to be here, and the reason I am here is because my father taught me a couple of things when I was growing up. He said, firstly, Susan, never forget where you came from. I was born and bred in Rotorua, and you can take the girl out of Rotorua, but can't take Rotorua out of the girl. And never forget the people that have helped you along the way. And those are the really important things. And I've had some wonderful opportunities, experiences, memories, highlights, whatever. And some of those have been here in Dunedin. Well,
Some of them haven't been.
I think that's what we talked about today. It's about the people, isn't it? And that's why we're here. And I just want to say that I'm really delighted to be here, and thanks for the wonderful memories that I've had playing, not only here in Dunedin, but further south too, my time in Southland and whatever. And today I had the great opportunity to go and visit Ian Galloway, and many of you will know Ian, and I've known Ian for a long time in my life. I met Ian when I was 25 years of age. I just walked the length of New Zealand raising money for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. Murray Halberg turned up in the Mamacoos, which is just out of Rotorua where I came from, and gave me a cheque for $5,000 to give to the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and then said, would you like to be a member of our trust? And I thought, that's a bit tricky, isn't it? That's sort of a quid pro quo thing, isn't it, Anyway, and that was when I met Ian. I was 25 years of age. So he is the most amazing person, principled. We wouldn't agree on anything. He doesn't like gay people, but that's okay. But you know what, I went there today to visit him at the Yvette Williams home. I haven't had one of those named after me. I've had a Rose. That'll come. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And I think they've probably burnt my bridges. I don't think I'm going to get anything named after me anymore, but that's okay. For years and years and years, every year of my life, Ian would send me a letter, talking about a whole lot of different topics, particularly about the beginning of squash actually, and a case of Central Otago wine. So I just went to remind him that at home, he must have forgotten the last couple of years. But it's great to be here, and I've got truckloads of fantastic memories, and as is mentioned, I've had 4 sons. I've been punished for all the terrible things I've said about men in my life. I've got 6 brothers and no sisters, and now I've got 4 sons and no daughters. So it's hard to know where to actually pitch your speech and what to talk about. Do I talk about the past, the present, or the future? It's really, because I've listened to the other people speak to the other presidents, and it's really always fantastic, isn't it, to hear people's different perspectives of what it's meant to them, what they've contributed to the game, and what it means to all of us in terms of the sport and a game that we've all loved. And most importantly, I feel very privileged to think that, I was an ordinary person who got the opportunity to do some extraordinary things. I'm the youngest of 7 children. I've got 6 older brothers. I grew up in Rotorua. We were involved in the first squash club that was established, not the first squash club that was established in New Zealand, of course that was in Timaru, but in Rotorua, which was the Colin Brownlee Centre. Colin was the father of Bruce Brownlee. My brothers started playing squash because they played tennis. It was raining one day, and that's what you did. You went and played squash, So I got dragged along from squash court to squash court from a very young age. I was shoved in the Vauxhall, went up to North Shore. We stayed with Dardeer, who was a famous New Zealand coach, and John Edwards. We stayed at Lakanuki Lodge. I didn't realise what that meant until I was about 16. That was the sign. I lived in John, it was a lack of Nookie Lodge. So my brothers used to play, my parents used to sit in the bar, my brothers used to sit in the bar, and my parents used to sit in the bar. And that was what happened. And I would spend hours and hours and hours hitting little black balls on the squash court, because that's the only way I knew how to fill in time, apart from sitting in the toilet saying Hail Marys, please make my brothers win today. So I do not want to listen to the post-mortem going home. It was a different era and a different time. So, people that knew me when I was growing up thought, God, that girl, the last thing she ever wanted to do in her life was play squash. She must be sick to death of it. But, that's the irony is that's what I did. And that's what I loved, and that's what I became used to, and that's what I started doing. And, there's a whole lot of urban myths that go around when you begin and whatever, and you never let the truth get in the way of a good story. But I think I'm a left-hander. I'm predominantly left-handed, but I play squash right-handed. And the story is that when I started to play when I was about 5, my older brother, my next oldest brother was Gerard, who was 10. He said to me, oh God, you can't, there's no good squash players that are left-handed, so I swapped. And God, imagine how good I would have been if So that's what I keep thinking. But, I suppose when I look back and think of all the times that the contribution that all of us have made to the game, I just want to, I probably think that I'm extraordinarily fortunate. As I said, I was born with a talent. I was given every opportunity to use it, and I went to England when I was 17 years of age. Okay, I left school in the middle of the, whatever it is, year 13 or 7th form or whatever it is, and I was taught by nuns. I went to an all-girls Catholic school. I remember halfway through the year, I came back one day, and one of the nuns said to me, hadn't done my homework, and she said, Susan, are you more interested in playing squash or going to school? And I thought, dumb question even for a Catholic. And I said, well, I'm more interested in playing squash actually, and I got up and left the classroom. The only problem was my parents were so devastated. Their only daughter after 6 sons, God help us, please go to university. So I was too scared to tell them that I left school, so I got dressed in my school uniform and hid under the house for 3 weeks. Because they both work full time, you see, so I just sort of think they would go, and then I would go off, and finally I got caught, but that was okay. So I left home when I was 17. I flew from Auckland to Heathrow. I thought it was a bit like catching the bus from Auckland to Rotorua actually. It couldn't be that much further, could it? But that is, and at the end of the day, I won my first British Open when I was 20. It was a little bit ahead of time or whatever, and there was a whole lot of things that happened in between, but You know, the amazing thing is if you have the opportunity ever to be the very best in something in the world, it does change your life, regardless of whether you think it does. And I remember leading up to the British Open, and Ross Norman, my male contemporary, as you all know, rang me about 3 or 4 weeks before the British Open and said, "Oh, Susan, there's a new club opening up in London called Stripes. Do you want to come to the opening?" I said, "Look, I'll get back to you, Ross." And I thought about it. And I went back to Ross and I said, "Look, Ross, I've decided not to go. You know, I've got the most important tournament of my life coming up in a few weeks' time, and I want to give myself the best opportunity." And he said, "Well, yes, so have I." I said, "Yeah, but Ross, I've got a chance of winning and you've got a shit show in hell." And so I went on to win my first British Open, and it does change your life, without a doubt. You know, winning your first, being the world champion of anything or being the best in the world changes your life, undoubtedly. And I remember going back to the club when I was based. In those days we had telegrams, you know, postman pack and trottle along. I didn't have Mark Gribbon to deliver my mail. That would have been really cool, and I hear he still delivers mail. So I'm planning on winning the Otago Squash Championships this year. But, you know, the interesting thing was that, you know, I got a truckload of telegrams that year from people I knew and people I didn't know, and invitations to the High Commission in New Zealand or whatever. And then the next year I won, and that New Zealand girls won again. It wasn't a fluke, so I got a whole lot more telegrams. And year after year after year, it was only Auntie Maisie from Iki Tahuna that bothered to send me a telegram, because it was expected to win, you know, whatever. So, you know, I've had some amazing opportunities in my life through a sport that we all love and that we've all enjoyed, and that's really amazing, you know. And when I retired in 1992 in Vancouver, I won the World Championships. I just knew that the time was right for me, because, you know, I had been on the circuit for a long time. I wanted to do other things. I wanted to have a family. If someone had said to me, you know, if that person had transported into my room that morning and said, "You're certainly going to retire today after winning the World Championships, but let me take you forward in 5 years' time, you're going to have 4 boys under 5 years," well, I would have kept playing for at least another 2. And only had 2 children. But you know, I'm very grateful. That's what I want to say. I just want to say for all the people, like the people here today who've contributed to the club, you know, the people that have served in the bar and have served on the committee, who've been the Ladies' Cup captain, who've been the treasurer, who've been the president, and whatever. The efforts that you make and have made, whilst they might not have been me personally, but I know there are lots of people that have done that have contributed to my own success, and I'm really grateful for that. And I also do that in my own way to contribute to other people. You know, I've been so fortunate. I've been recognised by my peers in my sport, by my country. You know, I never sat down when I was a young person. I sat down when I was a young person and said, yes, I want to win a British Open. Yes, I want to be a world champion. I never wrote down and said, geez, I want one of those Dame things that's going around, you know, because they look pretty important. And in fact, you know, when I had my 4th son, I just returned home from hospital with my 4th son. My mother-in-law was and said, "Never mind, you're still young enough to try again." And I was going through the mail, you know, and it was sort of stacked up, you know, whatever, and I had all cesarean, so, you know, you blokes won't understand, but it's a bit tricky. And I was going through the mail, and there was a letter there from the Governor-General saying that, you know, I'd been knighted. I don't know what they call it, they don't call it damed. Whatever. And you then, it's a little, I'm sure many of you have had that experience. You get a sort of like a party RSVP slip. You've got to go back and tick whether you want to accept it or not. And my mother was there at the time. She said, "God, Susan, make sure you tick the bloody right box." You know, you're a bit hormonal at the moment. It's not the things that you expect in life, you know, but nonetheless, if they come your way, I'm hardly going to say, okay. No, anyway, so a few weeks later, you have to keep it really quiet, you know, and so a few weeks later, it was Queen's birthday weekend, and it was announced in the papers, and my mum was still alive then. It's a huge honour, you know, whatever. And I remember it was Queen's birthday, and on the Monday after Queen's birthday, it's Queen's birthday now, isn't it? Anyway, I was pushing the wheelie bins at my driveway where I lived in Auckland. A couple of women walking up the drive and said, "Oh, that's no work for a Dane." I said, "No, but the chauffeur and the butler got the day off today." It's okay, but let me tell you, it comes with no perks. It comes with absolutely no perks. works. You can grovel, there's no Dame card, there's nothing. In fact, people don't even know what it means. I can tell you that because I went the other day I was at the airport in Auckland and I went to put my thing in the kiosk or whatever and it said not able to be accepted. So I went up to the Air New Zealand counter and the woman said, "Have you got any identification?" She was a young Indian woman and I said, yep, give her my passport and it's got Susan Devoy and she said, "Well, what does damn mean?" When they bought my tickets, it says Dame Susan Devoy, you see. She said, "What does damn mean?" And I looked at it and I said, "Oh, that's my nickname." She then proceeded to give me a very stern telling off about ever booking my tickets under my nickname at the airport. And I should know better and I would no longer be able to travel. And I said, "Yep, you're quite right." I'll just go back into my little shell and carry on. So, and I mean, it is interesting. I never expected to get an honour like that, and when it did actually happen, I remember I was invited to a Dame's afternoon tea once. I knew it was the Dame's afternoon tea because I was the only one there with without my hat and curls on. So, but these are the things that I suppose I've been very fortunate in experiences to have. One of the most famous introductions I've ever had, I met a lot of famous people. I've been to Buckingham Palace and met... Who do you meet at Buckingham Palace? Yeah. But I think the most famous introduction I've ever had was in New Zealand when we hosted the APEC Leaders Summit many, many years ago, I know. We're actually due for another one, but I received this sort of invitation. It was gold embossed to Dame Susan Devoy. No husband or partner or whatever, that's okay, he can babysit it. And I went along, it was the most intense security I've ever been to it. I think it was at the town hall. And I went into this room and I sat down and I was seated with, sadly, the late Sir Edmund Hillary and Lady Hillary, the late Sir Peter Blake and Lady Blake, the President of Brazil and his wife. I sat right next to Chelsea Clinton. Not that I want to name drop, it was like a normal everyday Sunday night dinner, I was trying to be really cool. And a couple of things struck me. Firstly, I'm a Dame and my husband doesn't get a title, although my friends call him Lady John. He doesn't really see the funny side, but that's okay. But it's funny, isn't it? Because, despite we think inequality does still exist, all those men there as sirs get to take their partners who are ladies and whatever, and here I was sitting on my own and next to Chelsea Clinton trying to make small talk. And then, believe it or not, 400 world top leaders were there and Bill Clinton, President Clinton arrived and whatever, and I thought, who would have thought as a young girl growing up in Rotorua that I'd have the opportunity to be here amongst the world's top people just for hitting a little blackboard around a few compliments. It's pretty amazing, isn't it, And I thought, well, I'm going to get the opportunity to go and introduce myself to the most powerful man at that time in the world and tell my children in years to come. They couldn't give a shit, actually. But you know what? That's not going to stop me. And I looked around and I thought, it wasn't sort of occasion where you went up and said, "G'day, Bella, I'm Susie from Roto Vegas." Probably you would have got shot from a sniper from over there. But anyway, I looked for the opportunity. I saw Josiah Beeman. He was the United States ambassador to New Zealand. We had met a little while earlier at Hillary's 80th birthday, so I went over and he recognised me and I said, "Could you please introduce me to the President?" People getting a matter of seconds, and I just wanted to be able to shake his hand. And so anyway, later in the evening he took me over and he said, "Mr. President, this is Dame Susan Devoy. She is New Zealand's most prolific Olympic gold medalist." That wasn't quite what I thought, and I thought that's not true, isn't it? And then he said, "How many gold medals have you won?" And I thought, "Oh well, you've told a couple of great big pork pies and I just said 10. I was so embarrassed, I'd actually just crawled under my hands and gone under the table and thought, well, he won't ever remember that, will he? But those are the sort of experiences that I've met Nelson Mandela, I've met the Queen, I've met Princess Diana when she was alive, I met Princess Charles, Ruby Charles, I should say.
Fine.
And I just want to say that, I've been very privileged to have had the opportunity to do it. to do and meet things and meet people, and do things that when I started out playing the game of squash that I would never have envisaged. And now I look back and think, what have I been able to offer? The other day I went to Christchurch a couple of weeks ago. They're launching, they had a launch night for building their new club post-earthquake, the Christchurch Squash Club, and it's a hard slog building a new club. You know, I know that. We've built a new club. Pat Taylor's here tonight, who's been a member here, and she's our current treasurer. She'll know the hard work and hard yards that go into being, part of a committee. And I think that, someone said to me when I was in Christchurch, it's a shame, Susan, that you haven't carried on and been involved in squash. And I thought for a minute, it's interesting, isn't it? What
What do you
constitutes...
do, Susan? What do you do? Are you not playing squash?
No, what constitutes being involved? What constitutes being involved? For me, it's completely different. I've got 4 sons. 4 of them have all played squash. One's now a runner in the States, as Gerard has said, and hopes to qualify for the Olympics. 3 of them tomorrow will play in the final of the Cousins Shields, the oldest squash club here in New Zealand. I'm not saying that, but it's in our blood.
Yeah.
My husband would love to play, but he's got a couple of dodgy hips and does whatever, but he's come home because he works in Melbourne at the moment to support our kids and do whatever. The greatest highlight for me, actually, apart from the new club that we have in Tauranga called the Devoy Squash and Fitness, and people might think it's named after me because of my name, it's named after me because it helped raise the money. It's actually the year I took the F grade ladies to Invercargill. Seriously, because the Super Champs,
down here in Otago.
the Super Champs is one of the most, we've got a wonderful grading system that's better than any sport in New Zealand, and we've got a wonderful Super Champs thing which gets people involved in the game and engaged and wants to enjoy and play, because at the end of the day we play the game. I've been fortunate to be able to be the very best, but we play the game for the sport that it is, for the camaraderie it's provided for us and the opportunities it's given to us. I'm not saying that it's easy, and I seriously believe that the future of the game is around good modern facilities. We've worked really hard. It took us 10 years to build our club in Tauranga. I moved to Tauranga 2002, and I think the club was open in 2013, I think. It took 10 years of hard slog to build a new, modern, state-of-the-art facility, and now we have a closed membership of over 600 members. And it's not because we all want to be elite players, it's because we provide an opportunity for all people of all ages to play the sport that we all love and enjoy. And it's not easy, it takes a whole real hard slog, and that's where I think that New Zealand Squash needs to start investing, is helping provincial towns or cities and whatever develop facilities that's going to keep the game alive. The other thing is, until squash is accepted for the Olympics, unfortunately our top players like Joelle and Paul are never going to be acknowledged on the world stage, regardless of how well they did in the Commonwealth Games. That's been forgotten about by Sport New Zealand today. Unfortunately, I don't agree with it. But that's the reality, and I think that's where, if you've really got invested into the game like I have, it's how do we move forward to help preserve a sport that is really, really important. Look, what was important to us? Having a great hit around, getting a bit of exercise and having a few beers. That's the reality, isn't it? Yeah. What today is, squash has a really, really, really important, it has a really, really great opportunity to be a sport that is actually a really good alternative or option if people understood to going to the gym. 40 minutes on the squash court provides all the exercise the same as going to a gym. Plus all the camaraderie, the social things and all the things. We need to be able to package that up and sell that as a really important product. And that's, I suppose, a little bit of what I've been involved in. Look, I'm coming to the end of my speech. Jenny Norton's looking at her watch.
I saw that, yeah.
I was paid nothing to speak for 30 and I've only done 26, so you've got to listen to me for a minute.
Jenny's got an old watch.
So what I would just like to end by saying is that I'd just like to acknowledge each and every one of you that has made and paid, or not made, has made a contribution to the success of squash for the Otago Squash Club in the past and in the present and hopefully in the future. And for someone like myself, who has taken a totally different path since I retired, if someone had said to me in 1992, Susan, that in 2013 you'll be the Race Relations Commissioner in New Zealand, I would have probably, you know, roared with laughter. But the reality is that all of the things that I've done in my sporting career have set me up very well for the things I've done in my personal and professional career, particularly around, whilst you don't understand, is the people that you mix with outside of New Zealand when you're playing a professional sport. So, you know, when I retired in 1992, I remember I was having my first child, and I'd never had one of those before, so I didn't quite know what to expect. And Jahangir Khan rang me and said, "Look, Susan, I'm going to Brunei to coach be involved with the Sultan of Brunei's coaching team or whatever, and his niece is playing squash, and he would really like a female squash player to come over and coach him." And I went back and said, "Oh, Django, you know, I'm having a baby, you know, I haven't had one of those before, and I'm not quite sure what's going to happen."